And hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Church Solutions Podcast. My name is Phil Thompson, and it's so good to have you here with us today as we do this weekly podcast. And again, my partner in crime, as I mentioned last week, Steve Lacy. And I emphasize crime. No, I'm just kidding. But he is my partner, a great guy, good coworker, and of course our CEO of our company. He's been under the weather. He had to go through some surgical procedures. Had the gallbladder removed, and then had some I don't know if you want to call it complications, but some stones, I guess, in the bile ducts or something. I don't know, but he's doing well now. He's home and he's getting his strength back. But it took a lot out of him. I mean, it's like a week or so without eating, and all that stuff. So with me today is Brittanye Messerly. And Brittanye, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Your last name is Messerly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Brittanye does work with us here. I know it sounds odd that I don't know her last name. I just call her Brittanye a lot. But I was thinking the other day about your last name, and this is way off track here, but I'll go down the road anyhow. There used to be this story in my family. I'm Thompson. My family's Thompson. But there was this story that the Thompsons really weren't the Thompsons, and that a boy was adopted. No, a girl was adopted that was pregnant into the Thompson family, but her last name was Messenger. And so whenever I think of your name, Messerly, I kind of want to say Messenger because that was drummed in my head for years, which, by the way, through DNA testing, we're pretty sure that proved not to be true. So Thompsons are Thompsons, I guess, and there's no German or whatever in us. So, and I'm assuming you've got some German in you, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I would think it would be. Okay, so enough rambling. We do this podcast all the time. We're a tech company. We do streaming video. We do mobile apps. We do lots of tools for churches, content management, and we will talk about tech things, but we also talk about other subjects because we're all of us are involved in our churches, and many of us involved in leadership. And today we're going to talk about a topic that I think is very helpful to pastors. Like my church actually did a series on this a couple of years ago. I think it's a topic very helpful to pastors, to people involved in leadership of the church, people involved in volunteer roles. I think it's good for anybody because it's all about relationships. So tell us, Brittanye, what are we talking about today?
Yes. So today we are talking about emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence is basically the ability to understand and manage your own emotions and for people around you, not just in leadership positions, but right. As Phil mentioned, it's very important for leadership positions because you're obviously managing people, and this is how you understand them so you can manage them better.
Yeah. I think of this whole topic, I think of the scripture in Galatians, the fruit of the Spirit is self-control. And, I think that's just a real important thing in our lives. Just our everyday relationships, but especially those of us involved in ministry. It's a passionate thing for all of us, no matter what level we might be on. And right. It's real important that we understand what emotional intelligence is and really how it can work, the keys to it, and how it can benefit us. And so I'm going to just kick it over to you and tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah. So speaking of kind of success and how emotional intelligence can help you, many studies have been done to show how emotional intelligence and different social skills are actually 4 times more important than IQ when you're considering success of people. So this is studies that have looked at really successful entrepreneurs, different CEOs, people in science field, PhDs, really the people that are most successful in their fields. They tend to have a high IQ, but it was shown again and again that more importantly, it was how they work with people and how they know how to manage people and how they understand their own emotions and how that impacts people. And one of the best things about emotional intelligence is that it can be learned. So it's a total skill that, as you said, you guys did, different lessons about it. And it's something that we can all learn and we can all better at, even if you're maybe pretty good at talking to people, there's still different keys that we can go over to improve. Yeah. So we're going to go over 5 keys to emotional intelligence. So these are kind of how they're typically broken down to understand them better. And the first one is self-awareness. So for self-awareness, some tips for this, one really good one is 360-degree feedback. So this is that you can evaluate your own performance and then match it up against the opinions of your different peers, people that you work really closely with, so that you can gain an insight on how your behavior is perceived. Because sometimes the way that we see how we're acting, it doesn't actually match up with how other people are viewing the way that we're behaving. Mm-hmm. So this is a way that you can make sure that everyone's on the same page with how you're performing in whatever leadership position you have. If you're a pastor, you want to make sure that people view you, that they can come and talk to you, that you are very open to feedback and with counseling with people. And so this is just a way to make sure that the way that you're viewing yourself matches up with how others view you.
What's a practical way to do that? I mean, I know, and this requires vulnerability.
Yes.
You know, and it's hard sometimes when you're a pastor or you're involved in a key leadership position. So, I mean, what's a practical way to do that, just off the top of your head?
I would say, well, in my experience, just having a very open discussion about it, just maybe sending out an email or a text to those, well, first identify those that could give you the best feedback. So maybe people that directly report to you or people that you work with closely, and just send them a message saying that you would like to have basically a feedback session. You could also do a 360-degree feedback with them as well. You could make it so that it's kind of maybe everyone in leadership, so maybe you're not singling yourself out specifically, but just say that you would like some feedback. And there's a lot of different little kind of feedback forms online that you can look up if you're looking up emotional intelligence, self-awareness, or just 360-degree feedback. There's a lot of different forms. And then I would suggest having the kind of formal sit down so that it's like it's not just like you talking to someone at the water cooler or anything like that. It's like
right.
You're really sitting down to really talk about this. Yeah.
That's
and then
good.
And you could also, if the person wouldn't feel comfortable maybe talking to you in person about things that they're unsure about, you can also just send them the form and say that they could just fill it out, or they could do it anonymously if you have a bigger group of people to do. Because it kind of depends on how your church is set up and who's available when.
Sure, absolutely. Well, you've got some other things in here too. As I'm cheating here and looking at your notes, you got the 360-degree feedback deal. You also talk about using a journal.
Yes. So journals are really helpful for self-awareness. If you just spend a couple minutes a day writing down your thoughts or your feelings, your actions, and then reflecting back on that later, that can really, well, you can get to a lot higher degree of self-awareness that way, because you're really seeing what you're doing. And I know from personal experience, it helps quite a bit.
Yeah. I used to journal. I haven't been journaling for quite a while, and I used to do it. It's very helpful for me. And then you've got the point here in your notes that I'm looking at. Is that you mentioned sense of humor, which of course I like.
Right.
But tell us how sense of humor works with self-awareness.
Yeah. So one of the kind of experts in emotional intelligence, his last name's Goleman, he has been working with this for a really long time. And so he says that people who possess really high levels of self-awareness, and kind of a way to gauge what your level of self-awareness is they have a really good sense of humor with both their own mistakes and other people's mistakes. And they're able to laugh at themselves. They're able to, even if maybe it's more of a touchy subject for them, if you're still able to have that sense of humor with yourself and being able to not take yourself so seriously, then it can really help both you understand yourself more and how other people view you. And so he found there's a couple others besides sense of humor. He said that suggests people who possess high levels of self-awareness have a good sense of humor. They're also confident in themselves and their abilities, and very aware of how other people perceive them. So all of those kind of go together as a good check for your self-awareness is your sense of humor, which is kind of a funny one. Because
I like
you
that a
think
lot.
of that with self-awareness, but
Yeah. So the first key is self-awareness, and then the second key is going to be self-management.
mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about that when it comes to emotional intelligence.
Yes. So self-management, or sometimes referred to as self-regulation. So one of the big ones for this is holding yourself accountable. This kind of goes without saying, but it's a good reminder that if you make a mistake, not to blame others when something goes wrong, or maybe if it's a team effort, not singling out one person if they were more in charge of a certain thing that went wrong. And it really addresses how important in leadership it is to make a commitment to admit your mistakes, and how those under you really look up to that and really respect when a leader is able to say that they're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a really good boost for morale for the team, because then it doesn't put you as such like a high head honcho type position, but more with everyone else. And so, yeah, it can be a really great thing when leaders are able to admit that they're wrong and face the consequences and understand, and also ask for forgiveness from people that work for them. It's a really great thing.
Makes you more approachable, I think.
Oh, you definitely. It makes you a lot more human, makes you a lot more likable in leadership positions. People like people that are able to admit they're wrong. It's, and it shows that you're really thinking about how you specifically influence others.
Yeah.
And another part of this is, practice being calm. So this goes with when things are really hectic and stressful. And it kind of goes with my last point here. So practice being calm, and also take a time out for reflection or prayer. So this is if there's a very stressful situation or some conflict. We're going to talk about conflict resolution a little bit later, but if maybe there's a really bad deadline that's coming up that you weren't weren't prepared for, and everyone's looking at you for what you're supposed to do, if you take that time to reflect on how you're going to respond to this, and perhaps pray about it if you start to feel angry or start to feel like you're going to maybe lash out or maybe not be as kind as you should be, to really just take that time to like remind yourself where you are, what you're doing, maybe pray for some help if you're really feeling angry in a situation where you need to respond to people very quickly, and just take that time to kind of reflect before doing.
Yeah, good stuff. That's very good practical stuff. Should we move on to the third point?
Yes. Yeah. So the third point is motivation. So this goes into intrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation is basically people doing action based upon internal reward instead of external reward. So, for example, if you're watching this podcast because you're interested in pastor leadership or how you can better yourself as a pastor or in a different church leadership position, then you're a lot more likely to actually take what we're saying and actually apply it into your life than if someone's just making you watch this. If they're just saying, "Hey, Streaming Church has a new podcast, go watch it." Then or if you were doing it for an academic grade of some sort, if we had that, if this was actually a class. But studies show time and time again that, it's basically no question that people are much more likely to be successful in what they're doing, being happy what they're doing, just really feeling a sense of accomplishment and really willing to do the extra mile for whatever the project is if they have internal reward versus external reward. So kind of a way, as in a leadership position in a church, you're kind of in a nice spot where people should be there to help the church. People should feel that internal reward because they're helping a church that they love. And so having different kind of maybe meetings that discuss like why we're really here, why we're doing this, especially if there's been different maybe trying times in the church, just kind of making sure that people remember that they're working for the church for a greater good instead of just an external reward, basically.
Yeah, definitely a greater cause. Yeah,
exactly. And that's why in a lot of different nonprofits, a lot of religious organizations, there can be such it can be a really great place for growth and great place for innovation and all different types of things because people feel very strongly about where they are.
Yeah. That's good. That's really good.
And then, so what kind of goes along with that, with motivation, is just re-examining yourself while you're in a church leadership position. Re-examining, I mean, that can also go with praying about it, kind of making sure that your motivations align, not just the people below you, but that your own intrinsic motivation is there for why you're leading the church. And then also the power of optimism. So for leadership, optimism is very important. Not so much doing like blind optimism if things are happening and then you're just not like lying to people about things being better than they are, but having the optimistic outlook about, so maybe something went wrong, or maybe you're just kind of in a slump, and then you're able to direct people the right way to go. You're able to say, yeah, maybe this was a bit of a setback, but here's how we're going to fix it. Here's what we're doing moving forward here. I don't think that this isn't going to stay this way. We have these steps to move forward, basically.
Yeah, I think optimism, I mean, let's face it, we'd rather be around positive people than negative people, right?
Exactly.
And it's easy sometimes to get negative and you get hit with a bunch of things. You're having a bad week or something. But I think, part of the whole thing of walking in faith is optimistic, because you're trusting God for things in your life. You're trusting God for the future. And, there's lots of promises throughout the scriptures. Stuff we're talking about here, we haven't posted scriptures next to it, but I can see lots of these things all throughout the scriptures. And I think that it's true. I think it's very true. So optimism, I think, is very much a powerful thing. And I've had to work on that over the years. I think I'm a lot better now than I used to be years ago with it. And I just feel much better when I'm optimistic about something than if I'm negative about it. And, again, we're not saying we deny reality,
right? No.
But we're saying, hey, there's possibilities even when things don't look too good. So,
and especially because it's very contagious for other people, especially when you're in a leadership position. That if you're kind of doom and gloom all the time, then people that follow you aren't as likely to be happy about what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so the fourth one is empathy. So most of us know what empathy is. It's basically putting yourself in someone else's emotional state or their situation. But a lot of people don't know what to do from that, or kind of how to sense other people's emotions. I mean, a lot of people won't just go out and tell you if something's really wrong. And so one of the best parts to understand other people's emotions and then be able to have empathy is paying attention to body language. A lot of how humans connect or how humans conversate or interact with each other isn't verbal, it's through body language. So if someone, a famous one is like if you cross your arms, you're more, kind of turned off from people, more closed off from people. And if you kind of just look around in a meeting of maybe different leadership positions or different people that you work with, if you really pay attention to how people are sitting, how their posture is, if they keep looking down, if they're looking like they're not engaged in the meeting, there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of tell if people are checked out. Or there's some really, maybe we can post some, but there's some really good books about reading body language and different articles about it. Just kind of, it's a really interesting science, actually, because there's a lot of different things that you can notice.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I've been lots of board meetings where I saw those things displayed, probably by myself as well, probably at times. It's like, oh, here we go again.
Right. That's an important point, though, that with this is also paying attention to your own body language, especially when you're leading. If you have bad body language, then a lot of people won't be as receptive to what you're saying.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I think I'm much more empathetic now than I ever have been. But I think when I was younger, I just didn't have a lot of empathy for people, and I can't explain it. I don't know why. And I even had, there was people in my life that passed away and people that had illnesses and stuff. And I'm not sure what the deal was, but I'm certainly much more empathetic now. I've obviously got a ways to go. Nobody's perfect, and I'm far from that. But empathy is, I think, so important. With connecting to people, especially if you're in ministry, because especially if somebody's hurting. We've been talking a little bit about maybe board meetings and things like that, but there's things too where you have people in your congregation, people you work with in ministry, or even if you're not in ministry,
or even just in the congregation,
And I mean, it's so important to be able to empathize with people because people are hurting, and we need each other. And when we can empathize, it makes a big difference for the person that's hurting.
Right. And yeah, as you were saying, that was a great point, talking about having empathy with your congregation, not just people that you work with, and that also allows you to have a better social connection with others, and it really promotes your helping behaviors. It's a really interesting kind of like there's a lot of actually neuroscience around empathy, but it does, if you have a serious empathy for people, you will naturally want to help them, and you'll naturally be better at helping them and more engaged in helpful behaviors, because kind of you're put in the mindset where like, oh, I actually need to help this person. And what goes along kind of with this, and might be why you might have been less empathetic in the past, is there are certain roadblocks to empathy. There are things like, and so these are things that you kind of have to really self-reflect about for yourself, for everyone, for you personally, because it's falling victim to different cognitive biases. And so being able to look at yourself and how you view the world, and being able to realize if you have a bias towards certain groups of people, and because with those biases come with like dehumanization, basically. And so when you view people as kind of different than you, or you have a bias towards them that might have been put on you when you were raised, or maybe just different times in life, you had maybe a negative, tend to dehumanize them, and so then we won't feel empathy for them. And so that's kind of the blockage for empathy.
That's a real good point. Absolutely. You've got in your notes, which I've cheated and looked at, you have leaders who master empathy perform more than 40% higher in coaching, engaging others in decision making.
Yep.
That's interesting how that is.
Yeah, it's a nice kind of tie-up for empathy, is how people with higher levels of empathy just perform better and will engaging with others in decision making, which is very important for pastors and church leadership. And yeah.
Good point. Okay, so the fifth one, shall we move on here? We got a couple more minutes. Social skills. We're talking about
fifth and last. Social skills. So with social skills, I guess I'll actually, so learning how to praise individuals and groups is very important. So a few aspects about this, you want to match the praise with the effort. You don't want to go kind of huge for maybe a small deed, and then it's kind of a bit odd that you praise them so much for kind of a small thing. But opposite, you also don't want to, if they've done a huge amount of work for you, you don't want to look like you're being ungrateful. So you want to see how you're going to, or set guidelines for how you're going to praise individuals and groups in a work setting, so that you don't overpraise someone, maybe that you have a more close personal relationship with, or underpraise someone that maybe don't work as much with. If you want to look more into it, there's a lot of articles about how to kind of manage praise when you're in a leadership position. One of kind of an easy one to do is, writing a sincere thank you note. People really appreciate that. I had a manager once who used to leave little notes with, usually, because she always knew our favorite type of like candy or baked goods. So she would leave like a little goodie and then a little note just basically saying thank you for like working overtime, or thank you for helping me with this project. You did so much for me. Just like a little thank you that shows that you really appreciate them.
Yeah, I think that's good. I've worked with people in ministry, and myself included here. I'm very task oriented, and so when people who are working with me or maybe under me, if I'm in some kind of a leadership capacity, which I am and have been, there's a tendency in the way I'm wired to think when somebody does the task, it's like, well, yeah, you did the task, good. That's what you were supposed to do,
Right.
But again, over the years, I begin to realize that showing gratitude for people, maybe it is their job, but showing gratitude for what they do and what they've done, again, just really just lightens people's hearts, and brightens their day.
Yeah. and they're just much more likely to, it goes kind of more into intrinsic motivation. It's part of what makes them more motivated to actually do great work for you and stay with you, and they feel like they're appreciated, and everyone wants to feel like they're appreciated, even though, as you said, yeah, it's their job, but they also want to feel like they're really contributing and that what they're doing actually matters, because most people really care about what they're doing, having it matter.
Yeah, and this is so important when you're working with volunteers, and in any organization, especially, just so important that
definitely any unpaid work, all of these are like tenfold for anyone that's unpaid, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Last bullet point about this when we talk about social skills.
Yes, we're going to talk, well, we're just going to glance over conflict resolution.
Okay.
So just a few kind of quick things about conflict resolution is when you're dealing with two people that are having either a small or large conflict, you need to listen to what is felt as well as what is said. You want to make sure that even though when you're listening, you're connecting to a more deeper need for what they're saying and their emotions behind it. Sometimes people can blow things up because of something underlying that's actually really bothering them. So being aware of that is important. Making conflict resolution the priority instead of like winning or someone being right. You want to make sure we want to be respectful of everyone's viewpoints, and we want the priority to be that everyone goes away with a strengthened relationship and that they're not fighting anymore, not that anyone's won. You want to focus on the present. That's a big one, is not pulling in things that have happened in the past. That's big for people. You want to have an environment of forgiveness. Yourself as a leader needs to be willing to forgive, especially if they're maybe fighting over something that then is going to reflect onto you, like if they're fighting over something that went wrong. You want to show them that you're willing to forgive, no matter who maybe is more in the wrong, that you're still able to forgive everyone, and that you know when to let something go. Basically, if the argument isn't really about work and it's more a personal argument, and if there's no way to resolve it, that they can kind of get to a point where at least they can agree to disagree, and that they can let it go and move on and just maybe not talk about that topic anymore if it's more of like a personal topic. Then kind of have an agreement at the end of like, this is how we're going to move forward. So yeah, those are some quick things about that, and that's emotional intelligence.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I think they're good points. Obviously, they're points that we all need to put some energy in and work on. I mean, as I was telling you, I like this topic, and I have looked into it over the years, and I think it's really helped me. I have a ways to go, but I think it's really helped.
We all do.
Person. Yeah, I think it's maybe a better person, better leader, and so I'm excited about it. So, emotional intelligence. Brittanye Messerly has been our guest today. We'd love to get your feedback on this. You can just shoot us an email, support@streamingchurch.tv. That's one of our domains and one of the things we do here. And again, I think this is all about relationships. And to me, Christianity is all about relationships. And so I think it fits in really well, and I think it's a positive thing. So again, feedback would be welcome, support@streamingchurch.tv. Well, thank you, Brittanye. Sure appreciate this.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to have you on here. We've had you on here before. We'll have you on you again. We will.
Is that a promise or a threat?
We'll have you. We'll get you on here again. And so we're going to wrap things up for Steve Lacy. He should be back next week. So we'll have Steve back on here next week. And folks, we sure appreciate you spending a little bit of time listening to the Church Solutions podcast. I'm Phil Thompson. I hope you have a great day. We'll catch you next time. Take care.